The rain fell like shards of glass against the wooden eaves of the small dojo perched on the hill. Every droplet seemed to echo the emptiness inside Takumi's chest. He sat on the worn tatami mat, staring at the old wooden practice sword in his hands, tracing its grain with trembling fingers. The room smelled of polished wood, damp earth, and the faint lingering smoke of incense, memories of lessons, of triumphs that felt a lifetime away. Takumi was only 24, but his eyes carried the weight of years he hadn't lived. His father had died when he was 12, leaving behind nothing but a sword, a few tattered scrolls, and a harsh lesson whispered into a boy's ears. Strength isn't measured by victory, but by the battle within yourself. For years, he had sought strength everywhere, in other people's approval, in fleeting victories, in the sharp edge of a blade. And yet, every time he reached for it, it slipped like water through his fingers. The townspeople whispered about him. Takumi of the empty sword. It stung, but he did not let their words break him. Or so he thought. Tonight, the wind howled through the cracked paper walls of the dojo, carrying with it a chill that seeped into Takumi's bones. He had just returned from yet another failed duel. His opponent, a brash young samurai from the neighboring village, had humiliated him not with skill, but with calm, precise composure, something Takumi lacked. He had trained his body, yet his mind faltered. His spirit wavered. He closed his eyes, and the faces of those he had failed, the laughter of children who had admired him, the disappointed look in his master's eyes, haunted him. "Why am I still so weak?" he whispered to the empty room, voice barely carrying over the storm outside. His hands gripped the wooden sword tighter, nails biting into the grain. Then, as if the storm had brought it to him, he remembered a fragment of a tale his father once told him, spoken in the flickering shadows of lantern light. Musashi once said, "The path to strength is through understanding yourself. Not the world, not your enemies, but the silent battlefield within your own heart." Takumi's brow furrowed. He had read Musashi's writings, of course, but they had always seemed abstract, almost impossible to grasp. Now, soaked in failure and shame, the words felt like a key dangling just out of reach. Was strength really not about beating others? Was it about facing himself? A soft creak echoed from the corner of the dojo. Takumi's eyes snapped open. There, framed by the dim candlelight, was Master Hiroshi, the old man who had trained him since childhood. His hair was silver as moonlight, eyes like dark stones, sharp and piercing. He said nothing, merely leaned on his staff, watching. Takumi's throat tightened. I failed again. His voice trembled, even as he tried to sound steady. No matter how hard I train, no matter how many hours I spend, He swallowed hard, trying to hold back tears. I can't become strong. Master Hiroshi stepped closer, silent as the wind. Then he spoke, low and deliberate, words that cut through the storm outside. Strength is not found in the sword, nor in the strikes, nor the victories. It is found in the moments when you are broken, and yet you choose to rise. You have fought the world, Takumi, but have you ever fought yourself? Takumi felt his heart seize. The old man's words were not comfort, they were fire. Pain, yes, but the kind that ignites change. I don't understand, he whispered. You will, Hiroshi replied. He walked to a small shelf and pulled down a rolled scroll, yellowed with age, edges frayed. He handed it to Takumi. Musashi's secret. But it is not a secret of blades or battles. It is a secret of the spirit. If you wish to find the strongest version of yourself, you will have to face what lies hidden in the shadows of your own heart. Fear, doubt, regret. Every piece of weakness you run from is a chain that binds you. Only when you face it will the path open. Takumi's hands shook as he unrolled the scroll. The first words, written in careful calligraphy, seemed to leap off the paper. To conquer another is strength. To conquer yourself is true power. The storm outside seemed to pause. The dojo held its breath. Takumi's chest ached as memories of failure, loss, and shame washed over him. He saw himself as he truly was, a boy lost in the shadow of expectations, chasing strength without understanding its true meaning. And for the first time, he felt the fragile stirrings of hope. He looked up at Master Hiroshi, who gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a challenge. A promise. A path forward. Takumi clenched the sword once more. The storm raged on outside, but inside him, something deeper shifted. Fear, doubt, and guilt still clawed at him, but now they were no longer enemies. They were the first opponents he had to face. He stepped outside into the rain, the water soaking through his clothes, his skin prickling. Each drop felt like a reminder. The world was vast, full of challenges. But the greatest battle was not against another, not against the world, but against himself. And in that moment, as the lightning split the sky and the thunder rolled over the hills, Takumi made a silent vow. A vow that no failure, no shame, no fear would ever define him again. He would learn Musashi's secret. He would face himself. And one day, he would rise, not as a warrior to defeat others, but as the strongest version of himself. But just as he turned back toward the dojo, the distant sound of hooves shattered the night. Shadows moved at the edge of the storm, figures Takumi did not recognize, yet he instinctively knew they were coming for him. His heart raced. The first true test of his path had arrived. The rain fell harder. The night seemed darker. And Takumi, trembling yet resolute, gripped his sword and stepped forward. The battle, he realized, was about to begin, not just with others, but with everything he had been running from inside himself. The figures in the distance drew closer, their silhouettes sharp against the flickering light of lightning. Takumi could make out the glint of swords, the rough outline of armor, and the hardened posture of seasoned fighters. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with the raw clarity of what he had never felt before, awareness. He remembered his father's words and the first lesson of Musashi's scroll. Face yourself before facing the world. The moment of truth was here, and he knew he could no longer rely on reflex or muscle alone. The weight of failure, of every lost duel, pressed into him, yet this time it did not paralyze him. The first rider slammed his horse to a halt at the edge of the dojo's clearing, eyes narrowing through the storm. The leader, a man older than the others but with a presence as fierce as fire, dismounted gracefully. His gaze met Takumi's, sharp, unyielding, and almost as if he could see the boy's soul. "You," the man said, voice low, carrying authority and a hint of mockery. "Takumi, yes? The one they called the Empty Sword. We have come to test if the stories of your weakness are true, or if perhaps there is more hiding under that trembling blade." Takumi's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide behind excuses, to deny the humiliation that awaited. But something inside him, something quiet and steady, said no. He did not flinch. He did not speak. He simply tightened his grip on his sword. The first attack came like a thunderclap. The rider lunged, blade slicing through the air, precise and merciless. Takumi's body moved on instinct, but this time, his mind followed. Each motion was deliberate, each block and parry infused with awareness of his own fear, his own hesitation. He did not fight to win. He fought to understand himself. Time slowed. Takumi felt the cold grip of doubt and insecurity as if it were a physical presence, pushing against him. Memories of every failed attempt, every mocking laugh, every scar he could never erase. They surged up and threatened to crush him. And yet, with each breath, he met them. Each strike of the enemy forced him to confront a part of himself, the boy who gave up too easily, the man who relied on rage, the soul that hid behind pride. Hours, or perhaps seconds, passed in the blur of motion. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within Takumi. He realized that every movement, every choice, was not just about defense or attack, but about clarity of mind. Musashi's words echoed in his thoughts. "Step into the void where fear and courage meet, and you will find yourself." By the time the first rider fell, not from skill alone but from Takumi's unexpected composure, the rain had soaked him through, plastering his hair to his forehead, dripping from his sleeves. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but the strange thing was that the weight of despair that had haunted him for years felt lighter. The other riders hesitated. They sensed a change, not just in his skill, but in the presence that now surrounded him. Takumi's body no longer moved blindly. it moved with purpose. Every parry and strike revealed the man he had been hiding from himself, the man he had yet to become. Master Hiroshi's teachings came alive in subtle ways. Takumi remembered sitting in the dojo, listening to the old man's silence more than his words. Observe. Listen. Feel the world. But first, feel yourself. He realized that each swing of his sword, each step, each heartbeat was not just against his enemies, but a conversation with his own weaknesses. Hours, or moments, later, the storm subsided. The riders, one by one, bowed their heads, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. They saw in Takumi what he had only begun to see himself. Strength was not born of arrogance, nor from defeating others. It was born from confronting every shadow within. But even as relief washed over him, a new tension gripped his heart. The battle had awakened something deeper, something he could not yet name. Musashi's secret, the path to becoming the strongest version of himself, was not a destination, it was a mirror. And in that mirror, Takumi glimpsed not only the warrior he could be but the darkness he had yet to face. Later, as he returned to the dojo, drenched and trembling, Master Hiroshi awaited him by the fire. The old man's eyes were calm, yet unyielding. "You have fought well," Hiroshi said. "But this is only the beginning. The enemies outside were merely shadows of what lies within. True mastery comes when you can walk through your fears and desires without being controlled by them. When you can endure pain, loneliness, and doubt, and still rise. Only then will you touch the edge of Musashi's path." Takumi sank to his knees, the fire warming his cold bones. He felt the exhaustion that comes from a battle fought not just with body, but with soul. The victory was sweet yet fragile. It was a stepping stone, a glimpse of a horizon he could barely imagine, and then the scroll called to him again. Takumi unrolled it, reading the next lines. "The sword is a tool. The mind is the blade. Cut through illusion, cut through fear. Only then will the world bend to the clarity within." Takumi clenched his fists. The words burned in his chest. The path ahead was not a gentle one. It was littered with trials, with moments that would strip him bare, body and spirit alike. But for the first time in his life, he welcomed it. For the first time, he understood, strength was not something given, nor something taken. It was something carved, slowly, painfully, from the raw stone of one's own soul, and in the distance, beyond the hills and the fading storm, Takumi felt the faint, inexorable pull of destiny. Something awaited him, something that would test every lesson, every ounce of courage he could summon. He rose from the tatami mat, rain still dripping from his hair, eyes burning with determination. The path to the strongest version of himself had begun, but the hardest battles were yet to come. The wind whispered through the dojo, carrying an unspoken warning: face yourself, or be consumed. Dawn broke over the hills like a slow awakening, painting the sky in muted golds and soft crimson. Takumi stood alone on the dojo's wooden veranda, wet hair plastered to his face, chest heaving, not from exertion alone, but from the weight of nights spent battling himself. The air was crisp, the earth smelling of rain, and for the first time, he noticed the silence not as emptiness, but as a presence. Months had passed since the stormy night that had forced him to confront the riders, the first test of his newfound understanding. Every day had been a crucible, hours of sword practice, of meditation, of walking through the narrow streets of his village observing, listening, learning. Every defeat, every stumble had been a lesson. Every fear, every pang of doubt, had been an enemy to meet with courage rather than avoid. Takumi had learned to feel the weight of his own heart. He had learned the sting of regret, the pull of anger, the temptation to hide from weakness. But he had learned more. He could let these things pass through him, like water over stone, and still remain grounded. Strength, he realized, was not about overpowering others. It was about holding oneself steady when the world threatened to pull him apart. It was on a quiet afternoon that the final test arrived, not from enemies, not from strangers, but from within. Takumi had returned to the hilltop clearing, alone, to practice. The wind was gentle, the sky cloudless. He lifted his wooden sword, the familiar weight grounding him. And then, as he moved through the motions, a memory struck him, a memory of his father, of the boy he had been, the fear he had felt that first day he held the sword. The shame he had carried, the mocking whispers, the nights of tears and silence. For a moment, Takumi froze. The old fear, sharp and cold, rose up as if to paralyze him. Doubt whispered in his mind, "You are not enough. You never were." He closed his eyes, felt the wind on his face, felt the muscles in his arms and legs, the rhythm of his heartbeat. And then he remembered Musashi's words, burned into his memory. To conquer another is strength. To conquer yourself is true power. The sword trembled slightly in his hands, not from weakness, but from the surge of emotion. And for the first time, he did not resist it. He let it wash over him, faced it fully. He spoke quietly aloud. "I have been afraid. I have been weak. I have failed. And I forgive myself for that. But I will not stop. I will rise." The moment stretched, silent except for the soft rustle of leaves. And then, with a clarity that was almost blinding, Takumi moved. Every swing, every step, was not about striking an enemy. It was about cutting through the illusions he had held of himself, fear, shame, regret, doubt. Every movement was precise, calm, and yet alive, as though the storm inside him had finally found its rhythm. When he lowered the sword, he felt a stillness he had never known. It was not triumph in the eyes of others, it was the quiet, unshakable knowledge that he had faced himself fully, without flinching. And that was stronger than any victory he could have won in the world outside. Master Hiroshi appeared behind him, as silent as ever. He said nothing, only observed. And in his eyes Takumi saw recognition, not pride, but something deeper, understanding that the journey was not finished, but that the seed of true mastery had taken root. "Strength," Hiroshi said finally, voice soft but unwavering, "is not the absence of fear. It is not the perfection of skill. It is the courage to continue when the world, and your own heart, press against you. You have learned this, Takumi. Not because you defeated others, but because you faced yourself." Takumi nodded, chest tight, eyes glistening. The path ahead was still long, still fraught with challenges he could not yet imagine. But the fear that had once crippled him no longer held dominion. He had tasted the truth of Musashi's secret, that the strongest version of oneself is not built in moments of comfort or victory, but forged in the relentless fires of inner struggle. He looked out over the village below, the sun catching rooftops, smoke curling from chimneys. Children played in the streets. Merchants set up stalls. Life moved forward, indifferent, as it always did. And yet, Takumi felt a harmony with it, a connection he had never felt before. He was not above the world, nor below it. He was present in it. Fully awake. Fully himself. Days turned into weeks, and Takumi's reputation grew, not for his victories, nor for the sound of his sword, but for the calm presence he carried. People came to him for guidance, for training, for wisdom. And he gave it freely, but with humility. He understood now, the battle was never truly about being the strongest in the eyes of others. It was about being whole, unshaken, and alive within oneself. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in fiery amber, Takumi stood at the edge of the dojo, sword resting lightly on his shoulder. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun, the pull of the wind, the life coursing through him, and he whispered, not to anyone, not even to the world, but to himself. "I am still learning. I am still becoming. But I am not afraid. And I will not run." It was a vow that needed no witness, a triumph that needed no applause. It was the quiet, eternal victory of the human spirit, messy, fragile, unstoppable. Musashi's secret was no longer a distant lesson on a tattered scroll. It lived inside Takumi, in every breath, every step, every choice to rise again. The storm had passed. The battle was not over, but Takumi had become the strongest version of himself. And in that, he had become free. The wind whispered through the trees once more, gentle and endless, carrying with it a single truth: strength begins where fear ends, and the greatest journey is the one you take within. Takumi smiled, lifted his sword, and took the first step forward.